My name is Kyle Miller. I'm 36 years old, and for the past decade, I have worked as a network manager for a major insurance company based in the sprawling, orderly grid of Denver, Colorado. My world, professionally and personally, is built on a foundation of logic and foresight. My job isn't just about fixing problems, it's about preventing them. I am a man of protocols and redundancies, of firewalls and contingency plans. I pride myself on being proactive, logical, and level-headed, qualities that have served me well. Or so I thought. For years, I applied this problem-solving, risk mitigation mindset to everything. A leaky faucet was a simple matter of identifying the faulty component and replacing it. A risky stock investment was a non-starter, a variable too unpredictable to introduce into the stable ecosystem of our finances. To me, everything had a logical order, a predictable flow. With enough forethought, with the right analysis, disaster could always be avoided. This approach, this philosophy, worked for a long time. It kept my world running smoothly, efficiently, just like the networks I managed. But life, as I have learned with a brutal, humbling clarity, is not a network. It doesn't always respond to logic or careful planning. It is chaotic, unpredictable, and filled with human variables that defy all attempts at control. And sometimes, the problems you don't see coming, the ones that bypass all your carefully constructed firewalls, are the ones that shake you to your very core. It all began last June, during what should have been a straightforward, low-risk family trip to my wife Bella's hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. Bella and I had been married for 14 years, and we had built what I genuinely believed was a stable, happy, and logically sound life together. We had two wonderful children, Mia, 9, and Ben, 7. Bella, a dedicated and passionate elementary school teacher, had a way of balancing our chaotic family life with a grace and patience I had always admired. She was the heart of our home. I was the framework that kept it standing. So when she suggested we drive down to Lexington for her cousin's wedding, I didn't think twice. It was a logical, low-stress proposition. It was a chance for Bella to reconnect with her family, for the kids to spend time with their grandparents, and for me to enjoy a brief, well-deserved respite from the pressures of work. I even, in my own quiet, reserved way, looked forward to meeting more of Bella's old friends, to hearing the stories about her younger years, stories I'd heard in bits and pieces over the years, but had never fully pieced together into a coherent narrative. In hindsight, I should have paid more attention to those stories. Bella's high school years, the life she had lived before me, seemed like a different world, a foreign country filled with names and faces I didn't know, experiences I couldn't share, and, apparently, unresolved connections, dormant variables, that I never imagined could surface after all this time and wreak such havoc on my carefully managed system. When we arrived in Lexington, the wedding was a grand, boisterous affair, a perfect storm of Southern charm, laughter, and a thick, cloying nostalgia. Bella was in her element, a radiant, shimmering vision, gliding through the crowd, catching up with relatives and friends she hadn't seen in years. I spent most of the evening with our kids, enjoying their uninhibited joy, taking mental snapshots of their happiness. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. That night, Bella ran into Marcus Reed, an old high school friend. He was charming, confident, and instantly, unsettlingly comfortable around her, in a way that caught my attention. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we all have old friends, ghosts from a past life. But as the evening progressed, I noticed subtle changes in Bella. Her laughter lingered a little longer. Her eyes sparkled a little brighter. Her stories flowed with an easy, unguarded vivacity I hadn't seen in years. I dismissed it at the time. I ran a quick, internal diagnostic and concluded that my own insecurities were creating a false positive. I didn't want to be the insecure, jealous husband who saw danger in every friendly smile. But a small, quiet seed of doubt was planted that night. A new, unknown variable had been introduced into the system. And as the days, and then weeks, unfolded, it began to grow. I didn't realize it at the time, but that trip to Lexington marked the beginning of a journey that would test everything I thought I knew about myself, my marriage, and the woman I loved. Looking back, I wonder, was there something I could have done differently? Could I have run a more thorough risk assessment? Or was this a lesson I was destined to learn the hard way? For now, let me take you back to that warm, humid night in Lexington, where Marcus Reed re-entered Bella's life and set mine on a path I never, in a million years, could have predicted. The wedding was everything you'd expect from a tight-knit Southern family. Big, loud, and filled with a potent, almost overwhelming mix of nostalgia and celebration. Bella, my wife, was in her element. She had grown up in Lexington, and this was her world, her native habitat. It was a world of familiar faces, of shared, half-forgotten stories, of the kind of easy, comfortable camaraderie that comes from knowing someone your entire life. I felt like an outsider, an observer, but I didn't mind. I enjoyed watching her, seeing this other version of the woman I knew, the version that existed before me. Our kids, Mia and Ben, were having the time of their lives, being doted on by their grandparents and running around with a flock of cousins they rarely saw. For once, I didn't have to be the guy solving everyone's problems, the network manager of our family's small, chaotic life. I could just be a spectator. That is, until Marcus Reed entered the picture. It happened after the ceremony, during the reception. Bella and I were at a table with some of her family, laughing about some old, apocryphal story, when a man approached. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with the easy, unself-conscious grace of someone who knew he belonged. Bella's face lit up when she saw him, a sudden, unguarded incandescence. "Marcus!" she exclaimed, standing up to hug him. The name didn't register with me right away. I assumed he was another one of her innumerable cousins, or maybe a family friend. But the hug lingered a bit longer than I expected, and when she pulled back, her smile was warmer, brighter, than any I had seen from her that evening. "Kyle, this is Marcus Reed," Bella said, turning to me, her hand still resting on his arm. "We went to high school together." I stood up and shook his hand, sizing him up as I did. He looked like someone who took care of himself. Broad shoulders, a neatly trimmed beard, and a polished, expensive-looking appearance that suggested he was used to making an impression. He smiled at me, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something, that I didn't like. Maybe it was just confidence. Or maybe it was recognition. The kind of recognition that comes when a man looks at another man's wife and remembers something she'd probably prefer he didn't. "Good to meet you, Kyle," he said. His tone was friendly enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was evaluating me, just as much as I was him. As the night went on, I kept an eye on them. He and Bella fell into an easy, immediate rhythm, their conversation flowing effortlessly. They talked about high school, about mutual friends, about old, shared memories. At one point, Bella laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. It wasn't the kind of polite, social laugh you give an old acquaintance. It was a genuine, deep, uninhibited laugh, the kind that comes from a real, visceral connection. I tried to join in the conversation, but it quickly became clear that I was the odd one out. The stories they shared were filled with names I didn't recognize, with moments I couldn't relate to. I felt like I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. As the evening wore on, I started noticing the little things. The way Marcus would lean in, a little too close, when Bella spoke. The way she would touch her hair, an unconscious, flirtatious gesture, when she laughed. The way their eyes would linger on each other, just for a moment too long. None of it was overt. None of it was proof of anything. And I told myself I was overthinking it, that my logical, analytical mind was seeing patterns where none existed. But a part of me, a small, quiet, primal part, couldn't help but wonder. Was this just two old friends catching up? Or was there something more? When the band started playing, a loud, brassy cover of some Motown hit, Bella and Marcus disappeared from the table. I tried to convince myself it was no big deal. Maybe they'd run into another old friend. Maybe she had just gone to the restroom. But when 20 minutes had passed, and then 30, I started to feel a slow, cold unease creeping into my chest. Eventually, she returned, her face flushed, her smile bright. "Sorry about that," she said, sliding into her seat. Marcus and I ran into some old friends from the debate team. It was a whole reunion. "Sounds like you're having a great time," I said, working to keep my own tone light, to betray none of the anxiety that was now a low, persistent hum in my mind. She didn't seem to notice the edge in my voice, or if she did, she ignored it. "Yeah," she replied, her smile softening. It's been so long since I've seen everyone. I forgot how much I missed this." That night, as we drove back to her parents' house, the kids asleep in the back seat. I couldn't stop myself from asking. So, Marcus seems interesting. You guys were close in high school. Bella glanced at me, her expression unreadable in the dark. Yeah, we were friends. He was in my group, you know. We all hung out together. I just nodded, pretending to accept her answer. But something about the way she said it, the careful, deliberate way she chose her words, didn't sit right with me. She was being cautious. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, from my work and from my life, it's that people are only cautious when they have something to hide. That was the moment the seed of doubt was planted. I didn't know it yet, but Marcus Reed wasn't just a figure from Bella's past. He was about to become a very real, very present, and very dangerous variable in our lives. And I was not prepared. I am not, by nature, a jealous man. My life, my marriage, my very worldview, is built on a foundation of trust and logic. Bella has always been trustworthy, and I have never had a reason to doubt her. But after that night at the wedding, something inside me, some deeply buried, primal circuit, had been tripped. It wasn't just the way she had laughed with Marcus, or the easy, effortless way their conversation had flowed. It was a feeling, a subtle, atmospheric undercurrent that I couldn't quite put into words. Call it instinct, or call it paranoia, but I couldn't shake it. When we returned to the orderly, predictable world of our life in Denver, I tried to push the wedding and Marcus out of my mind. Life went back to normal, or at least it seemed to. Bella was her usual self, a whirlwind of maternal efficiency and professional competence. She took care of the kids, she managed her demanding work schedule, she went about her daily routine. But every now and then, I'd catch her staring off into space, a faint, private smile on her lips, as if she were replaying a memory, a moment, that I was not a part of. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, but I stopped myself. I told myself I was being ridiculous. And then, the call came. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was in the garage, a place of comforting, tangible logic, sharpening the blade of the lawnmower. Bella had gone out to run errands, leaving Mia and Ben playing upstairs. I had just finished putting my tools away when the landline in the kitchen rang, its shrill, old-fashioned jangle a sharp intrusion into the quiet afternoon. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about answering it, but something made me pause. I decided to let Mia or Ben pick it up. Hello? I heard Mia's bright, clear voice. There was a pause. Then, a man's voice, muffled but distinct. Hi, is your mom home? No, she's not, Mia said politely. Can I take a message? Yes, the man's voice replied. Just let her know Marcus Reed called. I'll try her again later. Marcus. I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the workbench, my knuckles white. Why was he calling our house? Why was he calling Bella? I stepped out of the garage just in time to see Mia hanging up the phone. Who was that? I asked, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of casualness. A man named Marcus, she said, looking up at me, her expression a perfect mirror of childhood innocence. He said he's an old friend of Mom's. My stomach clenched. I managed a nod and muttered, Thanks, sweetheart, before heading back into the garage, into my sanctuary, which suddenly felt cold and unsafe. My mind was spinning. Why would Marcus call Bella? They hadn't spoken in 14 years, at least that's what I had assumed. And now, out of the blue, he was reaching out. That evening, Bella came home, and I waited for her to mention the call. She didn't. As we sat down for dinner, I casually brought it up. Marcus called today, I said, keeping my tone light, my eyes fixed on my plate. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, but only for a split second. A tiny, almost imperceptible glitch in the system. Oh, she said. What did he say? He said he'd call back later. I replied, watching her closely. Bella just nodded, her expression unreadable. That's nice of him. I haven't talked to him in years. He's probably just catching up with old friends. Her explanation seemed reasonable, but her body language told a different story. She was avoiding my gaze, her attention suddenly, intensely focused on her plate of food. And then, at exactly 8 p.m., as if on cue, the phone rang again. She excused herself to answer it in the next room. I didn't follow her, but I couldn't stop myself from listening. The conversation was muffled, but I could catch snippets. Laughter, familiar, easy tones, and something about dancing. My jaw tightened. When Bella returned, she acted as if nothing had happened. She sat next to me on the couch, curled up with a book, and smiled at me as if the phone call hadn't just set my heart racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind a chaotic, worrying machine. Who was Marcus Reed to Bella? Was he just an old friend? Or was there something more? My logical, rational side told me to let it go, to trust her, to trust the 14 years of our marriage. But another part of me, the part that had noticed the way she lit up when she talked to him at the wedding, the part that had heard the easy intimacy in their phone call, couldn't ignore the signs. The next day, I did something I had never done before, something I was not proud of. I went into her closet and pulled down a large, dusty box of her old keepsakes. I had to know. Inside, I found letters, cards, and mementos from our years together. But what caught my eye was her high school yearbook. I flipped through the pages until I found his picture. Marcus Reed, confident, smiling, and next to his photo, he had written a note to her, in a bold, looping script. My dearest Bella, these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. I'll never forget what we shared. I'll always love you. M. Asterisk. My hands shook as I closed the book and returned it to the box. I told myself it was just a relic from her past, a piece of ancient history. But the words, I'll always love you, stuck with me. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was reading too much into a high school romance, into a single phone call. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Marcus Reed wasn't done with Bella. And whether she realized it or not, he wasn't done with me, either. By Monday, my thoughts were a tangled, chaotic mess of suspicion and self-doubt. Bella went about her routine as if nothing had changed, a vision of calm, domestic efficiency. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was still looming over us, an invisible, unresolved presence. I told myself I was being paranoid, but paranoia has a way of burrowing into your mind, of taking root in the smallest of doubts. And the more I tried to dismiss it, the more it gnawed at me. I decided I needed answers. Not later, not when things had unraveled further, but now. That evening, after Bella had gone to bed, I stayed downstairs, under the pretense of finishing some work. Instead, my heart pounding a guilty, frantic rhythm against my ribs, I logged into her email account. I knew it was wrong, a profound violation of her privacy, but I couldn't stop myself. Her password was one I knew, one we had chosen together years ago. Our daughter's initials combined with her birth date. I told myself it was a necessary evil, that I just needed to confirm that there was nothing going on, that I was just being a fool. The inbox was mostly innocent. Emails from her colleagues, school updates from Mia and Ben's teachers, a flood of promotional junk from stores she had once shopped at. I exhaled, a wave of relief, and a profound sense of shame, washing over me. I was about to log out, to crawl into bed and try to forget my transgression, when a message, buried deep in her inbox, caught my eye. The subject line simply read, asterisk, looking forward to Tuesday. Asterisk, it was from Marcus Reed. My heart raced as I clicked on the email. Hi Bella, I'll be in Denver this week for work. Let's grab dinner Tuesday night. It'll be great to catch up properly. Just you and me. Let me know what time works for you. Marcus, asterisk. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. He was coming to Denver. For dinner. With Bella. Alone. I checked the sent folder next. Her reply was short, clipped, and to the point. Asterisk, Tuesday works. Dinner sounds great, but I can't stay out too long. Asterisk. No exclamation marks. No flowery enthusiasm. It was as casual, as nonchalant as could be. But even in its simplicity, it left me deeply uneasy. Why hadn't she mentioned this to me? Why had she agreed to a private dinner at all? I closed the email and sat there, staring blankly at the screen. My logical, rational side tried to find an innocent explanation. Maybe she just wanted to catch up. Maybe she didn't think it was a big deal. But my gut, that primal, unerring instinct, told me otherwise. The next day, I watched her closely. She seemed calm, even cheerful. She laughed with the kids. She kissed me goodbye as I left for work. She texted me during the day about the usual, mundane things, grocery lists, reminders for parent-teacher meetings, what we should have for dinner. Nothing in her demeanor, nothing in her words, suggested she was hiding anything. But that evening, as she prepared dinner, I noticed a slight change. She seemed distracted, her movements a little more deliberate, a little more self-conscious. When I asked if something was on her mind, she just brushed it off with a smile. "Just a long day," she said, her voice light. After dinner, she lingered on her phone longer than usual. I wanted to ask if it was Marcus she was messaging, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to tip my hand. Not yet. Tuesday arrived, and my anxiety was at an all-time high. Bella left the house early, dressed a little more carefully than usual, a little more polished. When I asked if she had any plans after work, she hesitated, just for a second, a tiny, almost imperceptible glitch in her otherwise smooth, confident demeanor. "I'm meeting a friend for dinner," she said. I didn't press her. I wanted to, but I held back. Instead, I stayed late at the office, pretending to catch up on work, while obsessively, compulsively, checking her email. And sure enough, there it was, a new message from Marcus. Asterisk, "Meet me at the Artisan at 7. Can't wait to see you." Asterisk. I debated whether to confront her before she left, to call her on her lie. But ultimately, I chose the harder, more painful path. I chose to wait. I needed to know how far this would go. When I got home, Bella was gone, and the kids were already in bed. I sat in the darkened living room, the silence of the house pressing down on me. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she already with him? Were they laughing over dinner? Did he still have that smug, confident look he'd worn at the wedding? I checked the time. It was 7:45. If I hurried, I could still catch them. Grabbing my keys, I left the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I would do when I saw them, what I would say. But one thing was clear. I couldn't just sit back and let this unfold without answers. As I drove to the restaurant, a storm of emotions raged inside me. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and the tiniest, most foolish flicker of hope. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it really was just dinner. But deep down, in the cold, logical core of my being, I knew the truth. Marcus wasn't in Denver for business. He was here for Bella, and I was about to find out just how far he was willing to go to take her from me. As I pulled into the valet line of the Artisan, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My grip on the steering wheel was tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I'd managed complex network failures, dealt with multi-million-dollar system crashes, but I'd never felt anything like this before. A toxic, volatile cocktail of anger, betrayal, and a profound, sickening dread. A part of me, the logical, rational part, still hoped I was wrong, that I would walk in and find Bella having an innocent meal with an old friend. But another part of me, the part that had been eating away at me for days, knew better. The restaurant's warm, amber glow spilled out into the cool evening air as I approached the entrance. I hesitated for a moment on the sidewalk, taking a deep, steadying breath, gathering myself before stepping inside. The hostess greeted me with a bright, professional smile, but I barely acknowledged her. My eyes scanned the dining area, a sea of white tablecloths and clinking wine glasses, moving past couples and groups, searching for them. And then I saw them. They were tucked into a quiet, secluded corner table, deep in conversation. Bella sat across from Marcus, her expression a mixture of laughter and a rapt, focused attentiveness. She looked beautiful, too beautiful. Her hair was styled perfectly, and she wore a deep red dress I hadn't seen in months, a dress she knew was my favorite, a dress that always caught my attention. My chest tightened as I realized, with a sudden, painful clarity, that she hadn't dressed up like that for me in a very long time. Marcus was leaning forward, his body language intimate, proprietary. His hand rested on the table, just inches from hers. Bella laughed at something he said, her eyes crinkling at the corners in that way they did when she was genuinely, truly happy. For a moment, it felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, had become unstable. This wasn't just a casual dinner between old friends. This was something else entirely. I forced myself to take another deep, steadying breath, to tamp down the storm of raw emotion that was threatening to consume me. My logical side, my professional training, screamed at me to walk away, to go home, to wait for her and confront her in the privacy of our own home. But I couldn't. I couldn't let this continue for another second. I approached the table slowly, my footsteps heavy, deliberate, on the polished hardwood floor. Bella saw me first. Her smile froze, her eyes widening in a slow-motion explosion of shock and guilt. Marcus turned, his own expression quickly shifting from one of surprise to something closer to irritation. "Kyle." Bella said, her voice a shaky, breathless whisper. She sat back, her hands pulling away from the table as if it were a hot stove, a guilty child caught in the act. Evening, I said, my voice a marvel of control, steady and calm, despite the fire that was roaring inside me. I pulled out the empty chair at their table and sat down. Hope I'm not interrupting. Marcus recovered quickly, his practiced, easy charm snapping back into place like a shield. He flashed me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Kyle. Right. Nice to see you again. I ignored him, my focus entirely on Bella. So this is the friend you mentioned, I said, my tone still quiet, but now edged with a fine, sharp layer of steel. Funny how you forgot to mention his name. Bella flushed, a deep, telltale crimson creeping up her neck. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Kyle, I'd love to hear what was so funny. I interrupted, my voice cutting her off. You seem to be having such a great time. Marcus cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair. Look, man, he said, his voice a low, placating murmur. I don't want any trouble. Bella and I are just catching up. Old friends. Nothing more. Old friends. I repeated, finally turning to him, my voice now as cold as ice. Tell me, Marcus, do you make a habit of asking your married old friends out for private, intimate dinners? He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. Or is this just a special occasion? A little trip down memory lane. Kyle, stop, Bella said, her voice rising slightly, a note of panic in her tone. It's not what you think. Then enlighten me, I said, shifting my gaze back to her. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks exactly like what I think. Bella took a deep, shuddering breath, her hands still trembling. Marcus reached out after the wedding. He wanted to catch up, to talk about old times. That's all this is. Just dinner. Nothing more. Her explanation was a lie. A weak, pathetic, transparent lie. And the calm, controlled facade I had so carefully constructed finally, irrevocably, shattered. Nothing more, I said, my voice rising, turning heads at the surrounding tables. Nothing more? You lied to me, Bella. You lied about who you were meeting. You lied about where you were going. And now, you're sitting here, lying to my face. So don't you dare tell me this is nothing more. Her face crumpled, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. Marcus stood up, throwing a few bills on the table. I think we should go, he said, his hand reaching for her arm. Don't you touch her, I said, my voice a low, dangerous growl. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. This is between my wife and me. He hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly, backed away, a look of pure, unadulterated contempt on his face. He turned and walked away, leaving Bella and me alone at the table, surrounded by the wreckage of our evening, of our marriage. How could you do this, Bella? I asked, my voice finally breaking, the anger replaced by a raw, profound, and all-consuming pain. How could you do this to us? She just shook her head, her sobs the only answer she could give. I don't remember driving home that night. My mind was a blur of raw, unfiltered emotion, rage, betrayal, and a strange, numbing clarity. The image of Victor, sprawled on the floor of Elena's office, his arrogant smirk finally wiped from his face, kept replaying in my mind. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, of the violence. But I didn't regret it, either. Some things needed to be said, and sometimes, words just weren't enough. When I walked through the front door of our house, it felt eerily quiet, profoundly empty. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. I stood in the foyer for a long moment, staring at the smiling photos of Elena and me that lined the walls, snapshots of a life that now felt like a cruel, elaborate lie. I headed straight for the kitchen, poured myself a large, neat whiskey, and sat at the table, my hand shaking slightly as I raised the glass to my lips. The adrenaline from the confrontation was still coursing through my veins, a hot, electric current. Elena came home about an hour later. I heard the door open, her hurried, anxious footsteps, and then the sound of her bag hitting the floor with a thud. She found me in the kitchen, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of anger and fear. What the hell was that, Mark? She demanded, her voice trembling. I looked at her, my own expression calm, almost placid on the outside, but burning on the inside. What was what, Elena? The part where your coworker had his hands all over you? Or the part where I reminded him that there are consequences for disrespecting another man's marriage? She threw up her hands, pacing the room like a caged animal. You didn't have to hit him. Do you realize what you've done? He could press charges, Mark. You could lose everything. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that seemed to echo in the silent kitchen. Lose everything? Don't you think I already have? I trusted you, Elena. I trusted us. And you threw it all away. For what? For him. Her expression softened, her shoulders sagging. It's not what you think, she said quietly. Don't. I snapped, cutting her off. Don't you dare insult my intelligence by pretending this wasn't exactly what it looked like. You've been lying to me for months. The late nights, the secret texts, the endless excuses. It's all been about him, hasn't it? She sank into the chair across from me, tears finally welling in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. Victor, he was there. And I was feeling lost. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Lost, I repeated, my voice rising with a raw, incredulous anger. You were lost, so you decided to find yourself in the arms of another man? That's your excuse. The argument spiraled from there. Every bottled-up frustration, every moment of doubt and suspicion from the past few months, came pouring out. She tried to explain herself, to justify her actions, but every word she spoke only deepened the wound. You don't understand, she said at one point, her voice breaking. I've been struggling, Mark. You've been so busy with your work, with your own life. And I felt invisible. Invisible, I scoffed. So your solution was to make yourself visible to him? To let him walk into our marriage and take what didn't belong to him. Or to you. She flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. You didn't even try to fix this, Elena. You didn't come to me. You didn't fight for us. You just gave up and let him fill the gap. By the time the argument ended, we were both exhausted, our words drained of emotion. She sat there in silence, tears streaming down her face, while I stared at the wall, my jaw clenched. I need space, I said finally, my voice flat, empty. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. What do you mean? I mean I'm leaving, I said, standing up and grabbing my keys from the hook by the door. You've made your choices, Elena. Now, I need to make mine. I packed a bag that night and drove to my best friend Josh's place. He didn't ask any questions. He just opened the door, handed me a beer, and gave me his couch. You want to talk about it? He asked, after a long, comfortable silence. Not yet, I replied, sinking into the cushions, the weight of the night, of the last few months, crashing down on me. Fair enough, he said, sitting down beside me. But just know, whatever it is, you're not alone, man. His words hit me harder than I expected. And for the first time that night, I felt the full, crushing weight of everything I had lost. I had walked out of my own home, left the woman I had loved for 8 years, and taken the first, terrifying step into an uncertain, unknown future. But for the first time in a very long time, I also felt free. Free to think, free to feel, and free to figure out what came next. The first night away from home felt like an amputation. I was a phantom limb, still feeling the presence of a life that was no longer attached to me. The couch at Josh's place was comfortable enough, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena and Victor in that office, her easy laughter, his smug, possessive smirk. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about the physical intimacy or whatever else might have happened. It was about the years of trust one had placed in her, the life we had built, a life that now felt like a meaningless, hollow sham. Josh, ever the loyal friend, gave me space when I needed it, but didn't let me wallow for too long. The next morning, he handed me a cup of black, strong coffee and sat across from me at his kitchen table, his expression serious. You've got to figure out what you're going to do, man, he said. You can't let this tear you apart. I know, I muttered, staring into the dark, bitter liquid in my mug. I don't know where to start. Josh leaned back, crossing his arms. Start by deciding what you want. Do you want to try and fix things? Or are you done? The question hung in the air between us, a stark, simple choice that felt impossibly complex. I wanted to scream that I was done, that I could never forgive her for what she had done. But the truth was, a part of me, a weak, stubborn, foolish part, still clung to the idea of us, of what we used to be. Meanwhile, Elena was relentless. She called and texted constantly, leaving a barrage of voicemails filled with apologies and desperate, pleading messages. "Mark, please talk to me," one began. Asterisk, "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I still love you. Don't throw away 8 years because of one mistake." Asterisk, "One mistake." The phrase made my blood boil every time I heard it. She didn't get to dismiss what she had done, the months of lies and deception, as a single, isolated lapse in judgment. It was a choice. A series of choices. I didn't respond to her messages. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't trust myself to say it calmly. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was social, too. Word of the incident spread quickly, as things like this often do. My sister, Angela, called one evening with an update I hadn't asked for. "People are talking, Mark," she said, her tone a mixture of concern and indignation. "Everyone's got their own version of what happened. Some are siding with you, but others, well, you know how people are." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "What are they saying?" "Some are saying you overreacted," she admitted, "that you shouldn't have hit Victor. But most people think he got what he deserved. And as for Elena," she trailed off, but I could guess the rest. "She's feeling it, isn't she?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Angela hesitated, then said, "Yeah, her friends are pulling away, and people at work are starting to talk. Victor's reputation isn't exactly helping her case." Hearing that didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. If anything, it just made me feel sad. Sad for the life we had built, for the woman I thought I knew, for the version of us that I had clung to for so long. At Josh's insistence, I started seeing a therapist. At first, it felt strange, clinical, sitting in a quiet, sunlit room with a stranger and spilling out my deepest, most painful thoughts. But Dr. Patel had a way of cutting through the chaos in my mind. "What do you want, Mark?" she asked during our first session. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to stop feeling this anger, this emptiness." She nodded, her expression calm and understanding. "That's a good place to start. Let's figure out what's at the root of those feelings." Day by day, I began to piece myself back together. I started running in the mornings, letting the steady, rhythmic pounding of my footsteps on the pavement drown out the relentless chatter in my head. I spent more time with Josh and Angela, leaning on them in ways I hadn't before. But most importantly, I started to rediscover who I was, outside of my marriage, outside of the betrayal. Elena's messages continued, each one more desperate than the last. But I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Because this time, the decision had to be mine, and I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, dictate how my story moved forward. News travels fast in the tight, interwoven ecosystem of a suburban social circle. And when the news is about a marriage imploding in a spectacular fashion, it spreads even faster. Within days, it seemed that our friends and family had formed a council of opinionated judges, each with their own take on what had happened, each with their own verdict. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of it all. Josh, my best friend, my steadfast ally, stood firmly in my corner. "Mark, you're better off without her," he said one evening, as we sat on his back porch, the city lights a distant, glittering carpet below. "If she can't see what she had, that's on her. And don't even get me started on Victor. That guy's got slimeball written all over him." His loyalty was a comforting, solid thing in a world that had suddenly become fluid and uncertain. On the other side of the spectrum was Elena's sister, Rachel. She called me not long after I'd moved out, her voice a sharp, accusatory weapon. "Mark, you've got to talk to her," she insisted. "She's a wreck. She knows she messed up, but you're not even giving her a chance to explain." "She's had plenty of chances to be honest with me, Rachel," I replied, my own voice cold, flat. "She made her choices. Now, she has to live with them." Rachel sighed, her tone softening, shifting tactics. "Look, I'm not excusing what she did, but people make mistakes. You've been together for 8 years. Doesn't that count for something?" "Not when she threw it all away for someone like Victor," I said firmly. "She didn't just make a mistake, Rachel. She betrayed me. She betrayed us." Rachel had no response to that, and the call ended in a tense, awkward silence. The real chaos, though, came from our mutual friends. Some reached out to express their unwavering support, while others, the ones who had always been closer to Elena, tiptoed around the issue, their conversations laced with a subtle, veiled judgment. "Kate, A friend we'd both known for years cornered me at a party Josh had dragged me to. A party I had no desire to be at. "Mark, I just want to say, I'm so sorry for what you're going through," she began, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Thanks, Kate," I said, taking a sip of my drink. But she continued, and I knew where this was going. Don't you think hitting Victor was a bit much?" I set my glass down on the counter and fixed her with a steady, unwavering gaze. "Kate," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "if you walked into your kitchen and found your husband kissing your best friend, what would you do?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, her cheeks turning a bright, telltale pink. "Fair point," she muttered, before retreating back into the crowd. Meanwhile, my sister Angela had gone on a one-woman crusade to defend my honor. "Mark doesn't need this drama," she told anyone who dared to question my actions. "Elena and Victor crossed a line, and Mark did what any self-respecting person would have done. If you think otherwise, maybe you should ask yourself how you'd react in his shoes." Her fiery, unconditional loyalty was both heartwarming and slightly terrifying. Even at work, the whispers followed me. Coworkers who had once been friendly now avoided my gaze in the hallway, clearly uncomfortable with the drama. A few, however, approached me with a quiet, understated solidarity. "Hey man," said Brian, one of the project managers, during a coffee break. "I heard what happened. That guy had it coming. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded, grateful for the support, even if it didn't ease the heavy, persistent ache in my chest. Elena, for her part, was facing her own social fallout. Angela, my ever-vigilant intelligence operative, kept me updated, whether I wanted her to or not. "She's losing friends left and right, Mark," Angela said one evening, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "People are starting to realize how shady Victor is. And now, they're questioning why she let him get so close in the first place." "Good," I replied, though the satisfaction I thought I would feel was absent, replaced by a strange, hollow emptiness. The divide among our friends and family only added to the weight of everything. Everyone had an opinion, but none of them had lived it. They hadn't seen the texts, heard the whispers, or felt the gut-wrenching, soul-crushing punch of betrayal. Josh was right about one thing, though. At the end of the day, it's your life, Mark, not theirs, he had said. Don't let their opinions decide what you do next. He was right, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. When Elena reached out again, it wasn't through a desperate, tearful text or a pleading, whiskey-soaked voicemail. It was an email. Formal. Almost detached. The subject line simply read, "Can we talk?" For a long moment, I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the delete button. I had ignored her previous messages, each one a small, sharp paper cut on my still-healing wounds. But this one felt different. It wasn't emotional. It was calculated. It was as if she had spent hours, days, crafting it. Against my better judgment, against every self-preservation instinct I had, I clicked it open. "Mark, asterisk," it began. "I know you have every reason to hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But I need to see you. Just once. I need to explain, face to face. Please, just give me that chance. Asterisk. Elena, asterisk." I closed my laptop, a familiar, hot frustration bubbling under the surface. What more was there to say? What more was there to explain? She had made her choices. I had seen enough. Still, the email lingered in my mind. Against my instincts, against every piece of advice Josh and Angela had given me, I agreed to meet her. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted closure. I wanted the answers to the questions I couldn't shake. We agreed to meet at a small, anonymous coffee shop, a neutral territory where emotions could, hopefully, stay in check. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked tired, worn down in a way I hadn't seen before. The vibrant, confident woman I had married was gone, replaced by a stranger. "Mark," she said, as I sat down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elena," I replied, my own voice a cool, distant thing. I leaned back in my chair. "You wanted to talk. So talk." She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she set her cup down. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About everything. About us. About what I did." "Good," I said, my tone flat. "Because I've been thinking about it, too." Her eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let my guard down. She took a deep breath before continuing. I don't know why I let things get as far as they did, she admitted. At first, it was harmless. Victor was charming. He was exciting. And I thought it was just a work friendship. But then, she trailed off, struggling to find the words. But then you let it become something more. I finished for her, my voice colder than I intended. She nodded, tears now spilling over, tracing silent, glittering paths down her cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mark. I swear I didn't. I was just, I don't know, lonely, lost. I felt like we were drifting apart, and Victor was there. He was paying attention, in a way I hadn't felt in so long. Her words stung, a sharp, painful jab. And instead of talking to me, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, instead of trying to fix what was broken between us, you turned to him. You chose him over us. She flinched at my words, her hands clutching the edge of the table. It wasn't like that. I never stopped loving you, Mark. I made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated, my voice finally rising, the last of my composure cracking. Elena, this wasn't a one-time slip-up. This was months of lying, of hiding things. You didn't make a mistake. You made a series of choices. And each and every one of those choices took you further and further away from me. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands, the sound a raw, broken thing in the quiet coffee shop. People at other tables glanced over, their faces a mixture of pity and curiosity. I didn't care. I waited, letting her cry, until she finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm so sorry. I stared at her, at the woman I had once trusted with everything, and I felt a deep, profound ache in my chest. Not pity, not anger. Just a hollow, desolate sadness for what we had lost. You're right, I said finally, my voice quiet, but firm. You don't deserve my forgiveness. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to give it to you. I stood up, throwing a few bills on the table to cover the coffee I hadn't touched. I'm done, Elena. Done with the lies, the betrayal, the pain. Whatever we had, it's gone. And I'm not going to keep hurting myself trying to hold on to it. She nodded, her tears flowing freely now. I understand, she said, her voice a trembling whisper. I wanted you to know how much I regret everything. I hope you figure things out, Elena, I said. But it won't be with me. As I walked out of that coffee shop, out into the cool, indifferent air, I felt a strange and profound mix of emotions. There was sadness, there was relief, and there was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Closure hadn't come in the way I expected, but it had come nonetheless. And now, for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally, truly, move forward. When I walked out of that coffee shop, I thought it was over. I thought I had finally closed the chapter on Elena, on our marriage, on the whole sordid, heartbreaking affair. But life, it seems, has a way of throwing in a few final, cruel twists before letting you move on completely. Elena's professional life, the very thing she had prioritized over our marriage, began to crumble shortly after our meeting. Victor, the same man who had wormed his way into her life and our marriage, the man whose charm and charisma she had found so intoxicating, showed his true colors. Word began to spread through her office, through the intricate, gossipy network of the corporate world, that Victor had crossed boundaries with other women, that he had a pattern of using his charm and his position to manipulate those around him. He wasn't just a charismatic coworker, he was a predator. And Elena, it seemed, had been one of his many targets. I learned about it through my sister, Angela, who, as always, seemed to have a direct, unimpeachable pipeline to all the latest gossip. She called me one evening, her voice a mixture of indignation and a strange, sisterly pity. Mark, she said, skipping over any pleasantries. Have you heard what's happening with Elena? No, I said flatly, not entirely sure I wanted to. Well, she began, Victor's been outed. A couple of other women at her firm came forward, said he's been inappropriate for months. HR's launched a full investigation, and from what I hear, it's not looking good for him. But here's the kicker. People are dragging Elena into it, too. Dragging her in how? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Some of the rumors are about her, Angela said hesitantly. Apparently, Victor's been telling people that whatever they had was mutual, that she was a willing participant. And now, Elena's credibility is shot. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, letting her words sink in. On some level, I wasn't surprised. Victor had always been a snake, and it made perfect sense that he would try to save himself by throwing Elena under the bus. Still, hearing it didn't bring me any satisfaction. If anything, it just deepened the ache of everything we had lost. A few days later, Elena reached out again. This time, it wasn't an apology or a plea for reconciliation. It was a quiet, resigned message. Asterisk, I wanted you to know, Victor's been fired. And I'm leaving the company, too. I can't stay there anymore. Not after everything. Asterisk. I stared at the text for a long, silent moment before replying. Asterisk. I'm sorry you're going through this. But you made your choices, Elena. I hope you find a way to move forward. Asterisk. Her response came almost immediately. Asterisk. I'm trying. I really am. Thank you. Asterisk. Hearing about her struggles didn't give me the closure I thought it might. It didn't erase the pain or validate my anger. Instead, it left me with a strange sense of pity. Not for the woman who had hurt me, but for the person she had become. A part of me wondered if she even recognized herself anymore. Victor's betrayal had exposed the cracks in her own life, and now, she was left to pick up the pieces, alone. It was a fate she had chosen, whether she realized it or not. For me, the fallout felt different. While Elena's world seemed to be crumbling, I was slowly, deliberately, rebuilding mine. I wasn't the same person I had been before all of this, but maybe that was a good thing. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more determined than ever to never let anyone undermine my worth again. The scars were still there, of course. Betrayal leaves a mark, no matter how much time passes. But those scars were no longer just reminders of what I had lost. They were proof of what I had survived. And that, I realized, was enough. The day I finalized the divorce, I expected to feel empty, like a chapter of my life had been torn out, leaving me with nothing but blank pages. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though I had been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was there. Walking out of the sterile, impersonal courthouse, I took a deep, clean breath, letting the cold, crisp air fill my lungs. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. At first, the silence in my new apartment was deafening. The walls seemed to echo with the ghosts of my past life with Elena. The sound of her laugh, the way she hummed while she was cooking, even the memory of the arguments that used to fill the gaps between us. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to fill that silence with something new. Myself. Josh had been right when he said I needed to rediscover who I was. For so long, my identity had been inextricably tied to being Elena's husband, to being one half of a perfect couple. Now, I was just Mark. And that, I was beginning to learn, was enough. I threw myself into things I had neglected for years. I started running every morning, letting the steady, rhythmic pounding of my footsteps on the pavement and the crisp, clean dawn air clear my mind. I picked up an old, forgotten guitar that had been gathering dust in the corner of my closet, fumbling my way through chords until a clumsy, hesitant music began to fill the room again. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in ages, going to trivia nights and backyard barbecues that reminded me what it felt like to laugh, without reservation. But the biggest change came when I joined a hiking group. Josh had dragged me to one of their meetups, insisting that I needed to get out of my apartment and into the world. At first, I was skeptical. But standing at the top of a mountain, looking out over miles and miles of rolling, green hills, I felt something stir inside me, a spark of life I hadn't realized was missing. It was during one of those hikes that I met Emily. She wasn't flashy or loud, like Elena. She didn't demand attention or try to impress anyone. She was simply kind. A high school art teacher who loved nature and spent her weekends exploring trails and painting landscapes. Our conversation started over a shared laugh about slipping on a muddy path, and before I knew it, we were talking about everything, from books, to travel, to the meaning of happiness. With Emily, there was no pretense, no games. She didn't try to fill the gaps Elena had left. She simply showed me that life could, and would, move forward. One slow, steady, deliberate step at a time. As I sat on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I reflected on everything that had brought me to this point. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, it had all shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I was more than what had happened to me. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Meeting Emily hadn't erased the past, but it had reminded me that the future was still mine to create. And as I sat there, the sound of crickets filling the warm, evening air, I realized I wasn't just moving on. I was moving forward. And that, I thought, was the beginning of something beautiful.